Just a little bit, you guys. Hello, recording. So we had a funny story today where Zoom wasn't working, and so I taught this lesson and it was on the document camera. But then because a lot of you are away today and I promised I would record it, I'm doing it again and I'm recording it again. So here we go. So basically in our previous classes, we started talking about quadratics and we learned how to change something from standard form to vertex form. And the process to do this is called completing the square. So standard form, you have something like ax squared plus bx plus c and is equal to y. And in vertex form, it would be y is equal to, and then it was a x minus h squared plus k, right? And so we basically said standard form is quite useless in that it doesn't really help you graph or anything like that. But vertex form is very helpful because then you can take this information and graph a parabola. And that was everything we did last week. So what are we doing today? Well, we're going back to factoring, which we learned about in the previous couple of units. And in today's class, we're going to learn how to go from standard form to factored form, and then use the information in factored form to graph a parabola. So I've broken it down into steps. Step number one is find the x-intercepts. And to find the x-intercept, you're going to let y equal to 0. Just like usual, that's always what we do, and it doesn't change for this one. One of the things I do want to point out is these words. So the word x-intercept, it's too dark. 1 second, let me change it to something lighter and let me make it a little bit thicker. So the word x-intercepts, the word zeros, and the word roots are all interchangeable. If I'm asking you for the roots, I'm basically asking you for the x-intercepts, you're gonna let y equal to 0. If I'm asking you for the zeros, I'm asking you for the x-intercepts, you're gonna let y equal to 0. So just be familiar that all three of these words are asking you for the exact same thing. Okay, so what we're going to do is in factored form, the zeros are the x values that make either factor 0. Okay, so what you do is you start by first letting the y equal to 0. And then you are going to go ahead and factor this. So it's a simple trinomial. You have an x here and an x here. Two numbers that multiply to give you 8 are, I mean, if I were to write it on the side over here, it would be 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. Which pairs of these numbers equals -6? It's going to be 2 and 4 because we can make it x minus 2 and x minus 4. Okay, so it's just a simple trinomial. You should review how to factor for these questions though, because you are going to need to know that. Okay, so just so that we know, this original form was standard form, pretty useless, can't really do much with it. We factored it, and then we ended up with factored form over here. Okay, so this isn't completing the square. If we completed the square, we would have ended up with vertex form, but it's a different format. Okay, now what we're going to do is when you have something in factored form, you can take each one of these factors, make each factor 0 and solve for x. So how am I going to do that? I am going to move over here. So the first one is x minus 2. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that factor and you're going to set it equal to 0. So x minus 2 is equal to 0. And you're going to solve for x. So it's going to be x is equal to 2. So I move the -2 over. And that means one of our x-intercepts is going to be at 2, 0. We're going to do the same thing for this one over here. And I guess I will just move it on this side. So it's going to be x minus 4 is equal to 0. And then x is going to be equal to 4. You just solve for x. And your x-intercept here is going to be 4, 0. So eventually when we get to graphing, we're going to remember that we have, actually, no, we can do that now. So I'm going to go all the way to my graph and I'm going to put these values in. So I have x is equal to 2 at 2, 0. We had an x-intercept here. And then at 4, 0, we had another x-intercept. So we can already see how our parabola is shaping up, but it's not enough information. We need a little bit more. Okay, one thing to note is when you have two x-intercepts, your vertex is going to be right in the middle of them. So remember that when we do the next part of this. Okay, so we figured out our x-intercepts. Step number 2 is determine the x-coordinate of the vertex, right? We need to figure out the vertex so we know where the parabola has like its maximum or minimum point. And it should be noted that the x-coordinate of the vertex is also known of your axis of symmetry. Okay, so what we're going to do to figure out the x coordinate of our vertex is we're going to take an average of these 2 points. So our point was x is equal to 2 and x is equal to 4. So again, to find out the x coordinate of our vertex, it's going to be x is equal to, take the average of these 2 points. So you're going to go 2 plus 4, this number plus this number, divided by 2, which is going to be 6 over 2, which is going to be 3. So that basically means if we have our vertex as a point, one of the values is 3, and we need to figure out what the second value is. We need to figure out what the y of the vertex is. Going back to our graph, our vertex is the same as our axis of symmetry. So we just figured out at 3, we are going to have our axis of symmetry. Like that's where the parabola is going to split in half at x is equal to 3. And it also tells me the x value of my vertex. The only thing is now we don't know how far below our vertex is going to go, right? It could be like at -4, -6, it could be up here. So we need to keep going. All right. Now we're going to determine the y coordinate of the vertex. So I'm just going to write down some important information here. We already figured out our vertex is 3, something. We also have factored our equation. So I'm just going to write that down again. It was y is equal to x minus 2 and x minus 4. So in order to figure out the y value of our vertex, what we're going to do is we're going to take this number 3, which we figured out when we took the average of our 2 points, and we're going to put it into either one of these equations. You can put it into the factored form or standard form. And in fact, just to prove that in class, what I did was I did both versions. So I'm going to do the factored form and I'll do the standard form just to show you that it really doesn't matter which one of these forms you use, you're going to get the exact same answer. Okay, either way, what's important to note is you're going to take that 3 and put it into here. So it's going to be 3 minus 2 and 3 minus 4. This is going to be 1 and -1, which is going to give me a -1. And then on this side, we're going to have 3 squared. So I'm putting in this x value into here to figure out what the y will be. 6 times 3 plus 8. So it's going to be 9 minus 18 plus 8. This is -9 plus 8. This is going to be -1. So you can see both the numbers match. It doesn't matter which one you use. The most important thing to note is that the vertex's y value is -1. So now we've figured out more information. We know our vertex is going to be at 3, -1. It's going to be right around here. Now, we don't use a step pattern in factored form, but there is one more thing we can figure out, and it's the y-intercept. Okay, so I know I don't have the space for it here, but we are going to do that. And just as a reminder, to figure out the y-intercept, you're going to let x equal to 0. And again, it doesn't matter which one of these equations you use to figure out the y-intercept. I think it's always easiest to use the standard form equation because the numbers work out really nicely. So I'm going to take the original equation, which is y is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 8. I'm going to sub in a 0, so it'll be 0 minus 0 plus 8. And so it's just going to give me a value of 0, 8. That means at 0, 8, we have our y-intercept. And that's it. So for factored form, you just need the 2 x-intercepts, the vertex, the y-intercept, and then you make a nice smooth curve, arrows on both sides, and you should label this parabola. Doesn't matter if you label it with the original or the factored form. So y is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 8. Okay, we're going to practice doing that a little bit more, but I wanted to show you 3 other examples of equations that look a little bit weird. So take a look at the first one. We have, let's say that you had, these are all factored already, okay? So these are all in factored form. So imagine you did all the work, you factored it, and you end up with something like this. So how exactly do you figure out the x values? Well, for this one, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to go x minus 2 is equal to 0. And then x is equal to 2. So your point here is going to be 2, 0. But how about this one? When you have no number attached to it, it's just a 0. So it's just going to be x is equal to 0. and 0, 0 is going to be one of your x-intercepts. So make a note to yourself when you have a number that's just by itself, like even though it's 2x, it's like saying 2x is equal to 0. And then when you solve this, it's still just going to be 0, 0. How about this example here? This is kind of like saying x minus 3 times x minus 3 is equal to 0. And in either one of these cases, x minus 3 is equal to 0, x is equal to 3. Your x-intercept is going to be 3, 0. But why is it repeated like this? Well, this is one of those cases where you have your parabola that is basically sitting right on the x-axis. That's why it's listed twice. It's still a parabola. It still has an x-intercept, but both of them are the same because the parabola is actually sitting on it. Okay, and then the last example, this one, what we do is we just, again, take each of them. It just requires a little bit more math. So it's going to be 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. 2x is equal to 3. X is equal to 3 over 2, which is the same as 1/2, right? You can make it into a mixed fraction, and it's always easiest to graph it when it's a mixed fraction like this. And then on this side, it's going to be 5x plus 1 is equal to 0. 5x is equal to -1, and x is going to be equal to -1/5. So this point is going to be -1/5, 0. On your graph, you would just estimate where this would be. Okay. Now there are going to be 3, I don't like these arrows. There are going to be 3 examples that we're going to try together. And then both of these are just like that. Actually, that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so 3 examples we're going to try. The first thing we have to do for all of them is get them into standard form. So what I'm going to do for this first equation is I noticed that it needs a magic number to get rid of all of the fractions. So I'm going to multiply everything by 6, and I'm going to end up getting x squared. This is going to be -8x is equal to, don't forget to multiply this one, even though it's not a fraction. I'm going to move that over to the other side. So it's going to be x squared minus 8x plus 12 is equal to 0. I'm going to go ahead and factor this. It's a simple trinomial, so I'm just going to get x, and I'm going to get -6 and -2. And then I am going to solve each one of these. So you don't have to show all your work every single time. If you can see, this is going to be x is equal to 6, and this is going to be x is equal to 2. You're going to have an x-intercept at 6, 0, and another one at 2, 0. So I'm going to go ahead and put those points in. So 6, 0 is here, and 2, 0 is here. Now we're ready to figure out our vertex. And first, we solve the x part of our vertex. And you do that by, obviously the vertex has to be right in the middle of these. So you take an average of the 2 points. Okay, so it's going to be your x value for your vertex is going to be this number plus this number. 6 plus 2 divided by 2. This is 8 divided by 2, which is just a 4. And to figure out the y version of your vertex, you're going to take either one of these. Remember how we proved it doesn't matter which form you take? I'm going to take the factored form, which is x minus 6 and x minus 2. And I'm going to put this value into it. So it's going to be 4 minus 6 and 4 minus 2, which is going to be -2 times 2, which is going to be -4. Just going to move this up. Change the color. Okay, so now what we have essentially done is we have figured out the 2 values for our vertex, and they are 4, -4. This is the x, this is the y. This, by the way, is also known as your axis of symmetry. So going back to this equation right here, x is equal to 4. This is where my axis of symmetry is going to be. You don't have to draw that, but if you wanted to know, it's just this one right here. X is equal to 4. And then at 4, -4, we're going to have our vertex. The last thing we want to do is I want to figure out what my y-intercept is. So remember, for your y-intercept, you're going to let x equal to 0. And it's always easiest to do that in standard form. So I'm going to go back to this form right here. And it's just going to be y is equal to 0. So actually, I'll write the whole equation down. It's going to be x squared minus 8x plus 12. This is going to become a 0. 8 times 0 is just 0. And it's going to be 12. So therefore our y-intercept is going to be at 0, 12. and it just seems like it's going to be a little bit above. So I'm going to take all of this information and I'm going to make a nice smooth curve this way, nice smooth curve this way, arrows on both ends, and then just label it with whatever equation you want. I'm going to label it just with this one. So x squared minus 8x plus 12. Okay, so again, when you're doing factored form, you need both the intercepts, and then the vertex. All right, for the next question, it's not a trinomial, but that's okay. We can still factor this. If I can get my pen to work. Why is my pen working? There we go. So when I factor this, I'm going to take out a 3x, and I'm going to be left with x plus 4 is equal to 0. I should have put it equal to 0 here, by the way. This question is not complete. It should be equal to 0. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and find my factors. So this was like that example I showed you before. This is just going to be x is equal. It's kind of like saying you take this factor and let it equal to 0, right? So 3x is equal to 0, which means x is going to be equal to 0. So our point is going to be at 0, 0. And then this one is just going to be x is equal to -4. So your point here is going to be -4, 0. So when you're graphing this, you're going to have one x-intercept here and another x-intercept here. Our vertex has to be in the middle, so we take the average of these 2 points. So I'm just going to use a color. That's okay. I'm going to use a color I haven't used before, maybe like a red. Okay, so I'm trying to find my vertex right now. And I start by taking an average of these 2 points. So it's going to be 0 plus -4 divided by 2. This is just -4 divided by 2, so it's just -2. And then to figure out the y version of this, you're going to put this into either one of these equations, the original or the factored. The number is going to be a little bit big. I guess for this one, I'm just going to put it into the original, which is going to be -2 squared plus 12 times -2. This is going to be 3 times 4, which is 12, minus 24. And it's going to be -12. So our vertex, which I'm going to call this, nope, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make it maybe this one. So my vertex is going to be -2, -12. So -2, this makes sense, right? -2 is right in the middle, and -12 is probably somewhere down here. I'm not quite done because I need to figure out my my y-intercept. So I'm going to go over here. My y-intercept, I'm going to let x equal to 0. It's just always easiest to go here and look at what happens. It's just everything becomes a 0. So if this was y is equal to 3x squared plus 12x, everything just becomes a 0. And that makes sense because we already have this point here. So now you're going to make your smooth curve, and you're going to label your graph 3x squared plus 12x. All right, the class is leaving, but I'm going to keep recording. Hopefully it will not be too loud in this recording. Okay, so for the final question, I'm going to once again move everything over to one side and make it into standard form. So it's going to be 4x squared minus 20x, and then 3 plus 6 is 9 is equal to 0. Bye, guys. And then I'm going to factor this. So this will become a complex trinomial. I'm going to just try these numbers. So I'll do 2x and 2x, which gives you 4x squared. And then for 9, I'm going to try 9 and 1. Smiley face, this is a 2x, this is 18. So it ends up working that it's negative. Bye, guys. Have a great day. Bye. Yeah. Hold on, I'm recording. Okay, so these are my factors. And now what I'm going to do is this one requires a little bit more work. So it's going to be 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. 2x is equal to 1, and x is going to be equal to a half. So it's going to be a half comma 0. And then this one, bye, take care. It's going to be 2x minus 9 is equal to 0. 2x is equal to 9. X is equal to 9 over 2, which is the same as 4 1/2. So this one is going to be 4 1/2 comma 0. Okay, so if I were to graph this, I would be putting this one at 0.5, 0, and this one at 4.5, 0. Now, don't be like, don't feel nervous if they're fractions. That's fine. It'll all work out. So now I'm going to figure out our vertex. The x value of our vertex is just an average of these points. So it's going to be 1/2 plus 9/2 all over 2. This is going to be 10/2, and this is actually going to become 10 times 1/2, right? I take the reciprocal. It's like divided by 2 is times 1/2. And this is going to be 10/4, which is 5/2. So the x value of my vertex is actually just 2.5. Like if I change this to a mixed fraction, it's going to be 2.5. Just pause this recording and try to do it yourself. Like add these fractions, which gives you 10/2, divided by 2 is the same as times 1/2. Then it's 10/4, which is 5/2, which is 2.5. And then for my y value, I'm going to put these into this and I'm going to solve. I'm not going to have enough room. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move to the bottom of the page. And I don't remember anything. So it's going to be, okay. So for your y, it's going to be 2x minus 1 and then 2x minus 9. And we're putting 5/2, the x value, into these. So it's going to be 2 times 5/2 minus 1, and then 2 times 5/2 minus 9. And I'll just quickly do this math. This is just going to be 5 minus 1. This is just going to be 5 minus 9. This is 4 times -4. By the way, if you're looking at it from our class and you're like, oh, it's a different question. Yeah, I changed the question because in our question in our class, it was a little too messy. So I just made it slightly easier. But even then, look at the numbers. So basically our fraction is going to be at 2.5, -16. This is obviously completely off our grid, but that's okay. 2.5 is here, and then -16 is going to be like somewhere along here. So we can see our graph is super, super stretched out. And now we need to figure out our y-intercept. I can actually move this back, and I'm going to go ahead and change the color of this to this. All right, let's go over here. Our y-intercept is going to be very easy to find, because you're going to let x equal to 0, and you can take any form you want. You can take this form or this form. Obviously, it's easier to take the standard form. So y is equal to 4x squared minus 20x plus 9, because when you put in zeros here, it'll just be 0 minus 0 plus 9. And so our y-intercept is going to be at 0, 9. So I'm going to come back here and make that point there. I'm going to put all of this together. Very, very, very elongated graph. Arrows, arrows, and then I'm just going to label this 4x squared minus 20x plus 9. And that's our lesson. Okay, so to recap, this is graphing in factored form. You factor something, you look at the x, each factor gives you the x-intercept. You use those x-intercepts to find the average, which gives you the x value of your vertex. Use this x value to plug it back into one of the original equations to find the y value of your vertex. Then you have your 2 x-intercepts in your vertex. You can figure out the y-intercept, and then you have 4 points to graph with. So this, you don't need the step pattern for this. It's a slightly different way of doing it. So go ahead and try these textbook questions as part of your homework. Okay, bye recording. Take care.